at some We will actually be looking at some video today. Our guest speakers are returning by popular demand. Carolyn Taylor, who is our Nordiq Canada biomechanist. And with her today, we have Tormod Vatten, who is the Alberta World Cup Academy coach, who will be joining her. But first, we'd like to welcome Ulf, who is our FFS representative, who will give us a quick overview of the amazing giveaway that we have today. For those who don't already know, FFS Rollerskis are a presenting partner with us, who have also been a great donor and sponsor. And Ulf, take it away.
Hello there. So yes, I'm excited that the FF is involved with Nordiq Canada. Personally, I've used the skis for a number of years and absolutely love them. The giveaway today is, well, I have one that's in pieces here. I was going to show you some of the characteristics of it. But what's unique about the FF skis is that first of all, the wheel looks different than your traditional roller ski wheels, and also the ski has some dampen properties, like vibration properties, that the skis actually have. It's like a suspension system on the skis, and the owner of FF skis, Henrik Lindhagen, isn't your typical Norwegian. He's Norwegians are born with skis on their feet, but Henrik, he was interested in cars, and he was well into his 30s before he actually discovered skiing. But this love of cars, that there's a connection there. So I'll get to that in a few moments. But he was at the cottage, well into his 30s, like I said, and he saw a pair of skis leaning up against the wall there, and thought, you know what, I'm gonna give this a try. And he absolutely fell in love that day with skiing, and as a 30-year-old, and then when the season was over, he wanted to roller ski, but he couldn't find anything that had that same feeling as when he was on snow. So and he tried pretty much everything that money could buy, but he couldn't find it, and his knees hurt, and so he thought, you know what, I'm gonna make my own, and that's what he did. He ventured out, and around 2017 he came up with what we now know as the FF Rollerski, and it has like I said, what's unique about it is the wheel. And for those of you who have actually tried the roller skis, they are well, they go straight, and it's because of this right here. You can see there. It has a groove in it, and they say, you know, the wheel, you can't reinvent the wheel, but he did. And because of this groove, these skis go straight. They have you don't have to make constant micro adjustments when you're skiing on them. They go where you want them to go, and also because of these bevels on the side, they're also easy to push and change direction with. And then combined with the floating fork, that's what FF stands for. The floating fork system is as you can see, there are no bolts that hold the fork to the frame. It's a piece of rubber, vulcanized rubber. Vulcanization is rubber that's hardened but still maintains its elasticity, and then it's fused to the fork, and this is what gives an actual dampening, cushioning effect, and so they float over rougher terrain. The skis are predictable. They go where you want them to, and the feeling on striding, and some argue that you shouldn't be striding on roller skis, but you know, with being mindful of good technique, yes, you can. And with these ones, they go where you want them to, and you can focus on ski technique with these roller skis, not roller ski technique. And I think that's what makes them very unique. And whoever's going to be the lucky recipient of a pair of these, I think you will not be disappointed. They are very amazing roller skis. And that's my short spiel. If you have any questions about it, I'd be happy to answer any. But other than that, then over to you, Nordiq Canada.
Oh, thank you so much. And again, your generosity and the donation of the skis for today's Lunch and Learn is greatly appreciated. I know the winner is going to be greatly appreciative of getting them as well today. So, and for those who have just joined us, today's Lunch and Learn is sponsored by FFS. There is a pair of classic roller skis on the line to win at the end. We will be using a random generator to pick the lucky winner, but you must have been on the whole call. So there you go. I'm keeping you guys hostage with some awesome roller skis. I will now hand it over to Carolyn and Tormod to take it away.
Some call it bribery rather than hostage, but that's fine too. Okay, guys, well, welcome back. This is going to be part 2 to biomechanics. And I am going to share my screen. And also what I am going to do is turn off my video simply because I'm already taxing my system probably more than my laptop would like to be. So hopefully everyone can see the presentation. Are we all good? Okay, so with me today, I got Tormod Vatten, coach I've only worked with briefly, but absolutely fell in love with him, and his area of expertise is greatly appreciated. And I love that he can directly translate what I say in biomechanics to coaching terms, and also offers a lot more insight into his experiences and the way he has worked with athletes in the past and applying these principles. So the objective today, again, I'm going to quickly go through the 4 main principles that we had discussed in part 1. And then we're going to start working through a process of analysis. This is not the way everyone has to analyze video or analyze their athletes and their technique. This is just a way that myself and Tormod have found to be useful when we work together. We're going to keep it as simple as possible and work on the double pull technique. And the reason why we're choosing the double pull technique is it's very much sagittal plane movement, so forward backward movement. So it will help us in terms of identifying direction of force, things like that. And I think one of the goals is we'll eventually start working through the different techniques, but double pull technique is where we're going to start today. And then we're going to put in practice the technical report card to a certain extent. So we will show you that as well. That is a tool that's being used by our national development teams and some of our senior teams. And it is something that you have as a tool in order to help you work through the process of analysis when analyzing your athletes' techniques. So again, I'll do a quick review, and then we're going to go through some videos. I only pulled, I think we've got like 8 different videos or so, and we'll work through them at the pace that works. I just have some world-class athletes that I've just pulled a couple clips off of, just to give you guys a difference of the variety that there is out there in terms of technique. As I discussed the last presentation, I don't believe there's any one single technique that works across the board for everyone, because every athlete is different. Every athlete has different strengths and weaknesses. And again, my role as a biomechanist is to try and work with the individual traits and strengths and work on a technique and eventually have a longer term goal as to what that should look like. But that evolves as the athlete evolves. And essentially, the way Tormod and I are going to do this is just kind of discuss what we see technically, and then drive home how these principles are at play and how that's the foundation of our analysis as we proceed. So again, I'm going to talk really quick through this because this should be a review, and I know everyone was studying in between the first presentation and now, so everyone knows it's cold. Principle of stability, the main points I want to get across in terms of principle of stability. For one, this is first and foremost, what you should be looking at when we're looking at key positions within a movement, everything starts from stability. If you're not stable, there's no point even looking at anything else. It's all got to start from a position of stability. And we talked about stability is determined the center of mass and where that lies within your base of support. We know that cross-country skiing is always going from a position of stability to a controlled instability, in which we use that to our advantage. Center of mass and base of support always change. So the center of mass, as it's exactly as it's described. So the mass, you talk about your limbs, and when you're moving your legs, the further your feet are moving behind you, you're taking the mass of those legs. So your center of mass is going to move where the mass of your body is. So as your body changes position, as does the center of mass. So anytime you're looking at an athlete for assessment, you need to be mindful. You need to try and find the approximate center of mass before you can even start analyzing the efficiency of the technique. And then base of support, that's everything that's in contact with the ground in the area that encompasses. And again, especially in terms of a skate ski, base of support is constantly changing. A little bit easier to understand when we're looking at the double pull technique. So principle of stability, again, number one, you always have to start there. Principle of impulse. So this is something we talked about last time, and we essentially, what is impulse? Impulse is force over time. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to change the momentum of the athlete. Okay, the athlete's trying to change their momentum. But considering that momentum is mass times velocity and their mass isn't changing, essentially we're applying an impulse in order to change velocity. And how do we apply, so impulse being force times time, how do we apply an impulse? In order to apply an impulse, or in order to apply force, essentially it's taking each muscles through the strength and shortening cycle. Okay, so you can see that if you have a larger range of motion, you're giving that shortening of that muscle more time to exert force. And as we talked about before, in terms of the range of motion, unless we're able to exert that force over the shortest period of time, and yes, I know we want to apply a large impulse, but biomechanically, we want to do that over a short period of time because that's when we initiate the stretch reflex in our muscles. So that's the way our bodies are meant to work. We all know that if anyone does squat jumps for testing or anything, when you have that counter movement jump and you can go down and jump up right away, you're going to jump a lot higher than when you have to squat, hold that position for a period of time, and then jump. All right, option one, you can jump higher. Option two, it's just not the way your body wants to work. So understanding that range of motion is important because technically it allows us to apply greater force. And that's what we need in order to increase our velocity. So don't worry, there's no skill testing question at the end of this. You get the skis if you get the right random selection. Principles 3 and 4, both of these have to do with the force. Okay, so we talked about principle of producing maximal force, and the main ways that we can produce maximal force is we want to make sure we're using all joints from biggest to smallest. So technically that's usually working from your core out towards your extremities and distal, and making sure that after one segment of your body moves, essentially we want to generate force and add to it, and we want to sum all the forces from all of the joints that we are using. We don't always want maximal force, and we discussed that last time as well. But typically when we're trying to go and ski as fast as we can, yes. And the more joints that we can actually engage, the better. Again, that's summing all the little forces from all those little muscles and stuff all end up for a bigger overall total. And then principle of force application. So everyone knows, everyone's heard of Newton's third law. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So if you are pulling and you're pulling out on a diagonal, you're going to have forward backward force, but you're also going to have a left and right force as a result. So we want to make sure, again, with double pulling technique, and we'll keep driving it, that it's double pulling, we want to move forward. So as we go through videos and stuff, we're going to want to have a look and make sure that the direction of the force application works. Because if we're not directing it in the intended motion we want to go, then essentially we are wasting our energy. All right, we're less efficient. So those are things that we will review and keep an eye on. Okay, so that was a quick review, and I know everyone's like, oh yeah, I know, Carolyn, we got this. Perfect. So when watching a video, only because we're going to be doing some video analysis, I don't want to just, I just want everyone to be a bit mindful when watching video, especially because everyone can take video nowadays. Let's face it. I bought a brand new camcorder, took it out to film the athletes, and I was, complimented on my old school camcorder just because I hold it in my hands. They called it old school. And yes, phones are absolutely fantastic. But again, when watching videos, you are going to be able to see absolutely everything. Everyone, I think, knows now how to take video with their phone and slow it down. And when you slow it down, you can see a ton of different errors. And really, we need to make sure that we are addressing the source and not the symptoms of so cause and effect. So, let's find what the root of the problem is and address that first. Because as soon as you do that, it'll be a ripple effect. So you may not see some of those other symptoms from that initial error presenting itself when you actually correct the root of the problem. In terms of point of view, these are things keep in mind when you first see your athlete and you are highlighting a few technical errors. Be mindful of the view that you have. So if you're always watching the athlete from the side, go back, look at them from the front or the back, just to make sure that the error you saw is, again, going back to the source and it isn't a symptom of this. It's also a snapshot in time. So make sure you're not correcting something that, maybe the athlete, got a blister from wearing a new pair of shoes the day before, and that's affecting their technique. And make sure it's something you don't want to correct, something that's a result of just like a one-off. Or, sometimes, like even working with my track and field athletes, like they just kind of get out on the wrong side of the bed, and it's just like, you know what, you're not quite yourself today, so we're not gonna go into any depth here. And that's usually the point where I'm like, just make sure you're doing this so you don't hurt yourself today, or go talk to the coach because maybe there's a different workout we need to be doing. But you need to remember it's a snapshot in time. It's not indicative of what they've done in the past or the future. Like, bring some context to it. So context, when you're analyzing technique, keep in mind that, different snow, you're going to have a slightly different technique on snow. Keep in mind the speed that they are going. Not everything's going to look the same at every single speed. And then most importantly, don't overanalyze. One of the examples I have of overanalyzing is I worked with the national swim team, and every Tuesday, Thursday, I would work with the athletes on turn technique. And this one athlete, like after 6 weeks, I'm like, gosh, like it's not really getting much better. And I'm looking, and then finally my coworker comes out and he's looking, and I'm like, we're trying to do this. He just keeps timing the wall incorrectly. And all of a sudden it's like, well, can he see? I'm like, what do you mean, can he see? He goes, well, he wears glasses, but he's not wearing glasses in the pool. And I'm like, huh. Next thing you know, he couldn't see. So we had to get him prescription goggles. And I'm just sitting there feeling pretty stupid because, I'm talking about joint angles, everything else. Meanwhile, like, guy couldn't see where the wall was. So of course his timing was off. Tormid, I think you've got a good example of a couple of these that you've experienced in the field. Something about an Achilles tendon or boots or something?
Yeah, especially the Achilles one. It was back in the days when we tried to work with some. It was actually one skate technique that time, and we felt the hard position he was in. This athlete wasn't good. Like he was in the back seat, and we've been working almost the whole winter, and when it came to the spring, we understood that his Achilles was so short he could never get the knee over the toe. So then, like, okay, we go to the physio and get some stretching, and that was the issue. So
when you mention back seat, you're referring to a certain position, right? Probably something more coaches are familiar with that term. Can you just explain that?
Yeah, so backseat is that when we want the center of mass to be over the front foot, on the front foot, and closer to the toe. And when you finishing the push and you move the center of mass further back, it end up to be quite like closer to the heel. And
yeah,
and you are on the back end of the base of support you have.
Which I know everyone that's seen the technical manual knows you don't want to be in the back seat, but to Tormund's point, he's trying to correct the position of the hips, and it turned out it was something as simple as he couldn't flex his ankle, so there's no way to actually get in the right positions unless he had flexibility in the ankles. And then just another example, just from point of view, that super popular Canadian sport of Canadian, rotational shot put, which I may or may not have done my thesis on. I was working with an athlete just in terms of looking at one of the views and seeing how the athlete's coming in the middle of the circle and like absolutely falling into middle of the circle. And then, which is bad, by the way. But as I'm looking at it, and, the coach was going after it, and it's like, no, we got to slow down. We got to slow down. And then finally I'm like, I got the other view. So I pulled the back view. And the problem wasn't falling in the circle. The problem was we're already falling over our feet when we were in the back, just in our preparation movements. We were taking ourselves off balance. So, of course, the minute the athlete starts moving and moving into the middle of the circle, the athlete was so unstable right from the very beginning that was the only choice we had. So unfortunately, for the majority of that practice, we were working on the wrong thing. And again, Carolyn felt like an idiot afterwards of, well, no kidding. If I looked at the other view, I would have realized that we were actually trying to correct the symptom instead of the source. So as soon as we corrected the stability, everything else was fine. Well, not everything else. Then there were other issues that came up afterwards, but not related to stability. So video is one tool that we have, but we also have this technical report card that's been put together. And when we talk about things in terms of, as I mentioned before, though, this is what our national teams are using. So basically coaches would go through it with the athlete and fill this out and put all the comments in, and things in terms of mitigating strategies where it says comments there. That's basically sets them up for what they are going to work on, hopefully until it gets resolved, and then they'll move on to the next. You can see at the top, I've kind of highlighted because we're going through the double pull technique. It kind of does some of the work for you in terms of what the cause and effect and source and symptom is. So the power position, that's very much where, for the majority of it, it's our position of stability. So if we're looking at an athlete's power position and they're not stable, then the power line, the lift, everything else is going to be out of place because they didn't hit it in step one. And it basically, if you have a very poor power position, no point analyzing power line and lift until you actually solidify what power position is. So power position very much is in terms of stability, as I mentioned. As we go through power line is basically if we don't have a proper power line, then what's our maximal force? If we're in a poor line, we can't get to our maximum force because we haven't set up our body in the correct way to apply a proper impulse. A good example of this was working on offset with one of the athletes a couple weeks ago. And as the athlete started in a very good power position on the left leg, and then somewhere along the line would lose that power line, and just kind of it would be more of a passive rather than an active push onto the right leg. And the right leg would plant okay, except we realized the impulse was insufficient because, yes, power position, we gave ourselves a good range of motion, which we should have been able to apply a very good impulse through. But because it was very passive and the athlete just started falling onto the right leg, we weren't using all of the joints in summation. The athlete wasn't engaging the hip. And all we would see at the end was the last little, 10 degrees of knee extension happening, which would happen very quickly. And the athlete took that as, oh, I moved through that very, very fast. So, I came in with, maybe 60 degrees of flexion. I'm like, yes, but only the last 10 degrees did you actually move through that in a quick manner. And it came down to, one, the athlete was concerned about timing. And you can see here, as we go a little lower, double pull, timing is something to look after. Because again, if your timing is off, then we're not going to get that summation of force happening. Sorry.
Carolyn, I'm just going to jump in. Sorry. If you coaches who are on the call, if you want to look in the chat, I have put a link into the draft technical manual and technical report card. And then Carolyn, just conscientious of time, it's already 12:30.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. And sorry, in terms of, this follow through and repositioning movements, again, this is where it also comes back to stability. Where did those limbs actually move to? How have they followed through? Have they recovered quickly? Have they positioned themselves underneath that center of mass again? Because again, this is incorrect. It's going to cycle back. And again, that can have a ripple effect. So thing with cross-country skiing is it's a cyclical motion, and one thing will affect everything that follows it. So, all right, I am going to start going through videos here. I'm just going to start with the sit ski. I just gave you a few cues up here. We're not going to analyze it, but I just want to give you guys an idea in terms of things to be looking for. Again, we talk about range of motion and that affecting what our impulse is that we can apply. You see the athletes when they're coming up to the top. We haven't talked about cadence. Tormod, I think you use the word frequency. When I say cadence, you use frequency. Is that right? But look at their limbs, check out where they're actually planting the pole. Are they planting the pole inside, outside? Do we see an angle on the pole? Again, we look at the group up top. These are all world-class athletes in their own right. And you can see the amount of variation we have from one to the other. I'll go to the next clip. Again, I'll play this a couple times. So if you want to focus on one athlete and then just watch another athlete the next time, I just want you guys to get an idea of the variability. And as we go through, again, I don't know the strengths and the weaknesses to each of these athletes. And that would be something I would need to know, because all of them kind of capitalize on different principles, and some of them capitalize more on frequency versus, powering through a larger range of motion. Very different. You will see some athletes really come up on their toes. This athlete here in particular is very high on the toes. See if you can determine why that would be. I mean, look at the amount of lean that athlete there has going into the poles. Have a look of where poles are being planted and what angle they are being planted, and see if you can determine where approximately the center of gravity are. Because again, if we're looking at the efficiency of pole plant, then we need to know where that center of mass is. Tormod, anything you see here that you want to point out, or we're good just to have a quick look?
I think we are good to go further. It's the variation about the variation from the athletes, like many solutions here. The thing maybe to think about when you take a video, this is from the start. So they are in an acceleration phase. They're getting up in speed. So maybe the technique is a little bit different there compared to like in the mid of a hill or in the mid of a interval. So
Absolutely.
That's something to be aware of as a coach, like which kind of phase are you in?
Yeah, and I'll just quickly go back to these guys again. You see when they're at the top of the hill, they're still trying to climb up, and then you will see that they increase the range of motion as they are going down. The frequency or the cadence decreases. So again, bringing context to what we're actually seeing. This is coming up the video that we had seen last time. Again, I just want you guys to see a variety of what happens. So as we are watching this athlete, we'll go through a couple of these only from the side view. We'll pull up some videos afterwards, but I know coaches, it's important for you guys to see it as you would normally see it. Gives you an idea of rhythm. One of the best examples I can tell you is the hurdles coach that I worked with. He would basically close his eyes and listen to the rhythm, and he could pick out what the technical error was just based on the rhythm that he heard of the athlete. Anyways, this athlete's actually quite powerful. I'm just going to pick a spot again as you guys are watching this. What does he look like from a stability point of view? Okay, in terms of impulse, what sort of range of motion do you see? Is it an appropriate range of motion? Is he, if I just take an example of where this athlete is planting the poles and where the hands are. I know a lot of coaches have a discussion in terms of how far out the hands should be. The one thing I don't like about that is they usually relate it in terms of the head. Well, if your head position is off, then, the position of your hands relative to your head is going to be off. So we need to find better ways to explain it to the athletes that is relative to what they are doing. And again, range of motion, because that's with impulse. Maximum force. We know the keys to maximum force, summation of force. Is he going from larger muscles to smaller muscles? We know in terms of stability and timing where he's moving that center of mass. So if his arms and legs are coming too far behind him and his center of mass is going to be slower coming from a backwards position to a frontwards position. So what does his timing look like? And then direction of force, which we won't be able to see a lot from this view. And my apologies for that. We will show you some videos from the frontward direction. But as we go through this, Tormid, what is, I think we started from here last time. So if we are going start at full plant, and again, Tormid made the point to me last time when we went through this of, let's see more than one pole plant, please. So we've seen a couple here. So Tormid, what are your first thoughts when you're going through this video?
Yeah, my first thought is the first point of the technique manual, like the stability. And the one thing, especially on the roller skis, it's to look at is if the skis are like even, like either from side to side, so not like the one leg going either forward or backwards throughout the motion, or going the sideways. Some of the roller skis are worn out differently, and they got not rolling straight forward, so they're going out to the side. So at least for this athlete, I see that when he are finishing his pole plant, the center mass is moving so far back, so far behind, that he need to shoot his left leg forward to move the center mass back to a base of support. So if you have been freezing this picture and open up his binding, it could be he could have fell backwards, for example. And in basis stability, that then it's so unstable that we would have started to work with that.
Yeah, and in terms of the sign and symptom, I think Tormid touched on a few pieces here. One, sometimes the equipment itself could be the culprit. So when you do see this with an athlete, Tormund, what process do you take? So you've seen the error, and because it is a stability issue, it is something that needs to be addressed sooner than later, because again, everything we see, all the movements we see afterwards could be a result of that instability.
Mm.
So Tormund, what would be the process you go through when you see something like this?
In this picture, I would have like, it's very easy to say from coach standpoint that, oh, shorten your hands, like make stop earlier, stop your power plant next to the hip or next to when you're passing the legs. That can be kind of difficult for the athletes to catch, is my understanding. So what at least I try to work on is to try to synchronize the upper body and arms. They going up at the same time. This athlete, you see that he raises upper body a little bit sooner than the arms is coming. So it's kind of not super synchronized there.
I think
so
we'll
I
see
would
that
have,
more in the next video too.
yeah. So instead of ask athlete to stop the hands earlier or sooner in the pole plant, ask them to go up, synchronize the arm and upper body, go up at the same time. For athletes in academy here, they are used to the metaphor carpet shaking. So to try to avoid that the upper body coming and then the arm and upper body and then an arm, and then try to synchronize the arms and the body so it can come up to a good power position again.
Love it. And then we do need to, and it goes back to the very first example that you provided as well. You know, if an athlete is putting one foot in front of the other, one, we need to know, are there any injuries? Are we, you know, subconsciously protecting ourselves from something? And then also in terms of, do we have the flexibility? So is that left foot coming forward because the athlete just doesn't have the flexibility to keep it behind? So I'm with Tormund that only because we saw this athlete and we know a bit more of the other information regarding the athlete. We know it's not an ankle issue, and this for him really is a timing issue and where that center of mass was in terms of the recovery phase. But again, it's important that coaches don't make assumptions and actually go through the list. Is it physical? Is it technical? Like, first of all, if you ask the athlete and point that out to the athlete, can the athlete go and make the correction right away? Or what else? So you kind of have to work through, there really is a order of operation, so to speak, when we're going through it. So I'm going to leave it with that there. So again, stability. I will quickly go through the arms and the pole plant. I had talked about it before that in terms of when this force is coming down, there is going to be a vertical force and there is going to be a horizontal force. Okay, so depending where it is in respect to the center of gravity, it could be a braking force. I think the center of gravity is here and the pole plant is pretty close to being aligned with the center of gravity. Again, as we mentioned last time, it's got nothing to do with the position of the feet. It's the center of gravity. The athlete, as compared to some of the other athletes that we saw from the World Cup, wasn't quite as open in the hips or anything as before. So, you know, at pole plant, again, we saw him already coming down with the upper body. We saw the arms coming down. Again, keep in mind, what's the direction of force that we want to go? We want to be moving forward. So anything we can do to actually make that horizontal force direction a bit more is important. But Tormund, you had something to say in terms of asphalt, pole position versus snow.
Yeah, it's or in general the underlayer can be different from time to time. Like asphalt is harder than the snow, obviously, and you get way more like directly feedback, if you can use that word. The force is transferring easier on the asphalt than on snow. So if we're gonna look at it in a mechanical way, like if we're gonna go
Yep.
to details here, we see that the elbow here like kind of absorbing a little bit of the power, like you moving the elbow. And
Yeah.
my experience is that it's very hard to avoid on snow because you will not get that directly feedback when you're putting the force in the ground.
Yeah.
And you can also, the other benefit to like have a little bit absorption in the elbow is that you can using the body weight to hang on the poles, hang on the strap, because yeah, so you get more momentum into the pole plant.
Yeah. So I think those were two really good points. So hopefully everyone can see and is focused on the arm angle here. Again, if I quickly go back to some of the top skiers, so look at this athlete in front here, you will see how far out the hands are. Again, in relation to the person's body, you will see that the poles are coming at more of an angle. So again, as the athlete comes down on the poles, there's going to be more of a horizontal component to the force being applied as compared to the other athlete we were just watching. You will see that the position in the elbows remains, and you don't quite see the same shock going through the body as we saw on asphalt. So again, it's may or may not be a strength issue and an impulse issue for the athlete, or a direction of force issue. It could just be that they are on asphalt. It is something you're not going to change because it kind of resolves itself when it goes back on snow, especially determined by equipment. So if the athlete has been, and I know the day that we were filming this athlete here, it had rained in the morning. And athletes like to think that it's that much more slippery when it rains and all of a sudden their poles aren't catching. Sometimes it's mostly equipment maintenance that hasn't actually been done and they're not quite sharp enough. So they may feel that they need to dig in, and they're actually doing it purposely of applying more force vertically because they were worried if they put it at more of an angle that it'll slip. So this is an athlete that when you slow it down looks quite different, but when you actually put it at full speed, I'm not sure if people can actually see some timing issues here or not. Hopefully you can, because I do. And you also kind of see as the athlete is coming down, it's almost like a quick down before it goes back. So in terms of direction of force, I have issues there. I also, and this is something that is very common, Tormund, you have a couple athletes like this, correct?
Yeah.
Come in a little knock-kneed. Again, this is something I'm fortunate because I was far enough back that I was able to get a good angle on it. This is something typically you don't always see from the side, but you'll see from the front. And when it comes to a force application, so if we're coming and extending that knee there is going to be an outward directed force as well. So again, if this is a sagittal plane movement and we want our direction of force to remain in that sagittal plane, this is something I have a little bit of an issue with. One, just from a health perspective, you're adding different forces on that knee joint. Knee wants to go forward, backward. It doesn't like any sideways. It doesn't like any twisting. It doesn't like any extra torques going about it. It wants to move in the front and backwards direction. Okay, Tormund, this looks very different from the last athlete that we had. What are some of the points that you look at when you're going through this?
Yeah, like one of the point is like, yeah, we was talking about the stability in the previous video, and like you see that here also the left leg is moving a little bit forward, so which can be hard to avoid. We never know if it's was a small rock there or a pine cone or something like that similar, but if it's repeatable, it's something to be aware of. With this athlete, I think, yeah, if you're gonna extend the thing from the previous video, is how this athlete's getting up like in the repositioning phase, like how she's getting up to a new pole plant, that the center mass is that far back. So instead of using the ankles, like using the joints to get up in a position, back into position, she more or less just push the knees backwards, and the most of the repositioning happens from the upper body.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, if our timing is off, our ability to generate maximum force is going to be off. We will be affecting the range of motions, or our ability to apply an impulse is going to be off. Again, it can go back to the power position and the power line. Again, where is our center of mass in terms of where that pole plant is? As Tormod said, she was sitting back, the left foot was moving forward, and that was just to try and counter and move her center of mass forward a little bit more. She's coming up and her arms haven't even started moving forward yet. Okay, so here we are, nice fully extended, and then by the time she comes down, so she doesn't have the same range in her hips, so she won't be able to use those muscles through the full range, so she's going to be applying a smaller impulse than normal. We look at the position in her arms. She actually sits, she actually gets into her straps, just as you had mentioned before, Tormod. She doesn't absorb a ton here. But what I do see, and which we didn't see in the other athletes that we have looked at, is look at the amount of crunching, so to speak, and the way she's curving that back. We haven't talked about it as much here, but when you're curving that spine and you're not keeping it as a stiff plank, it means all of that force we're generating with the upper body and lower body is slowly being absorbed by each of those vertebrae. You really want to engage the core to stabilize it. And that is something I forgot to discuss last time, is yes, we do want the direction of force and the position in the direction that we're trying to move. However, you are going to be using stabilizing muscles that will help you. So not every single muscle is going to be moving in that plane. But we don't want to absorb the force that we're generating either, because that's less efficient. I'm just going to move us along here. Stephen, any questions or anything that are popping up as we go? All right, so we've got two views here that are synchronized. And again, like some of the things that you see on the right, we talked about the skis kind of kicking out. Well, was she turning? Yes, to a certain extent she was turning, but as we see, it is something that is happening a bit more constantly. So turning. Now she's kind of trying to go straight, but we see everything kicking out to the side. The one thing we didn't talk about to much of an extent, again, we see this position. This is not a strong position to be in. Whether or not we're not really getting into the proper power position. So yes, our center of mass is there, but do we have any twisting or anything of the upper body? Like you can see that the hands aren't symmetrical. The right hand, which is the one on the left-hand side in the video, is lower than the other hand. This indicates to me that there's a lot of instability even within her body. We're not stabilizing the core. We're dissipating energy. Anytime you see the knees coming in, one of the things you do have to ask yourself, and this is very common, is do we have a strong enough glute med? So we're not really using our hips here. Again, you can't assume that it is a weakness in the hips. We have to walk it back. And again, the first thing you would do is point it out to the athlete and see if they can correct it. And if they can, then you know it's something that they're just not mindful enough of. So that would be kind of the process you would work through there. And if it turns out they're unable to do it and they're not able to stack correctly, if you have them put their entire weight on each leg and they're not able to keep that knee from coming in, then that tells you it is a weakness and you got to go, and these are things you got to fix in the gym. And, you know, you talk to physiotherapist or athletic trainer and work on some exercises to strengthen that hip. Anything in here, Tormod, you want to discuss?
I think we can go to the next one.
To the next one. Okay.
You point out the.
Yep. So again, the athlete is turned, but this is something you see the knees coming in slightly. So again, the direction of force we would think is pretty good. Do we have a proper hinge at the hip? We actually see a little bit of twist. I don't know if you guys can see the direction the knees are facing versus the direction that the shoulders are facing. Tormod, you're familiar with this athlete. Could there be some reason for that to happen?
Yeah, the thing sometimes it's a little bit how they are used to go, like how the ski trails are groomed where they are from. They are maybe used to offset on one side more than the other because the heels are leaning that way, and they also have been doing different sports, like a bit different backgrounds. So
yep.
It's like adapting things from movement they have learned from before. Like yep. And this athlete or some athletes also can have some kind of injuries in the past where they, for example, try to do the best they can with either one pole or other kind of exercises. So
yep. But from a stability point of view, this athlete is more stable looking than the ones we've seen in the past. We do see a pretty good range of motion. Yes, the hands come back a bit. Hands coming back a bit aren't a problem as long as they are being recovered in time and all of the timing is correct. So this athlete does a little bit better job than the ones we've seen in the past. Again, in terms of impulse, what is the range of motion that we see? Was the athlete planting the pole with a little bit more to give in terms of using the upper body and bringing it down in order to generate force? In terms of the direction of force, where the pole plants are, even when looking at the front view, are actually pretty close and in line. Again, when you look at the follow-through can actually indicate the direction the force was being applied. So that's really important to look at follow-through. So when I look at the follow-through of where the hands are going, the hands do come out and then come in tighter towards the body. So we are actually getting a little bit of left-right force being applied. So that would be something that could be cleaned up a bit. Again, follow through is so important. I don't know if you guys are familiar with qualitative analysis or in terms of the phases of a movement, but the force producing phases and the follow through. Again, what is the purpose of each phase and are we meeting that goal? Just to show you, only because we showed a couple of athletes before, the knees buckling is very, very common. And this is something I wish more and more coaches would address. It is not a strong position. It leads to instability, and it can lead to incorrect force application and force direction. So we'll see the follow through of this athlete is a little bit more through. What are the path of the arms? Something a little wonky on the right hand side there that I can see. The hand is coming out and then in. So again, to me, anything that's not moving in the sagittal plane in double pull is, to me, an indicator of we're wasting energy somewhere. So we need to fix the energy leaks. But stability wise, probably not quite where we saw some previous athletes at, but again, different phases, different things you'll see in developing athletes. Yeah, anyways, being conscious of time. Tormod and I, when we first went through this, probably spent a couple hours just on one video, but I'll spare you. Hopefully you guys got an idea of some of the discussion in terms of coaches are very good looking at positions, but can we actually correctly identify the cause and effect? And again, it's understanding the principles, going back to those principles that will help us get to the source or the symptom. and determine which one is which. Just one of the things I want to point out, this is a super busy slide. I don't expect you to do all of this. This is directly from the technical manual. I think Julie's the one who pulled this all together. But what do we see in world-class skiers? So none of this really talks about positions, but it basically shows you, again, principle of stability, principle of stability, principle of producing maximum force. So basically, you know, skiers have sequential muscle activation. We're not telling you exactly what muscles and how much. We're just saying it is the, you know, joints largest to smallest. We know that it is in a sequence. We know we don't see a break in the force from one joint to the next. It's all very fluid. We are transferring force from one to the next, and we're generating greater velocity as each of those extra limbs come into play. So these are things that are all common in world-class skiers, and it all comes back to the principles. So these are the reasons why they are as good as they do, because all these principles are in play at all times. That's basically all Tormod and I had. I don't know if we have a few minutes for questions or how you want to do this, but Julie, if you're around, I leave it to you. I will turn on my video again. Tormod, anything else to add that I probably spoke over and went too quickly through?
I think we covered the most thing, and we went a bit more straight to try to solve things right now. Like, oh, this can really be better, and I think from a coach standpoint, like try to see what the athletes are doing well first, and then corrigate one thing at a time. Like that is the thing I have to add.
Yeah. Amazing. And I'm just reading some of the things in the comments, and yes, you guys were asking excellent questions. Yeah, is a roller ski path cambered, right? Because we need to apply context in order to watch it. Slow-mo is much better. Oh, so it wasn't playing properly. Oh no, that would have been good to know. All my tricks in terms of trying to play proper video weren't quite working.
Conscientious, Carolyn, of time and the fact that we're losing a few people who.
Yep, nope, we're done. That's I was leaving it to you.
Oh, okay, great.
Yes, no.
I am going to use a random generator to pick our winners. So we have 48 people who were good enough to stay on the call long enough in terms of being eligible to win the skis today. And I'm going to hit click. Oh, whoops, sorry, that did not work. Hold on.
I'm just looking at Peggy and Gary, and I want to know if that's picked up, or Jerry, which one gets it.
Oh, yeah. All right. And our winner is, random generatedly, is Kat Denis. Kat Denis, are you still on the call?
I am.
Congratulations. We will get in touch with you on getting those roller skis out to you. And again, a massive thank you to Alf and FFS for providing those skis, not just for Kat today, but also for our national team athletes who are incredibly grateful for it. And I just want to thank massive thank you to Tormod and Carolyn. I know the amount of work that it went into this was huge and incredibly useful. And always much appreciated by our community. As we can see in the chat, everyone's saying thank you. And stay tuned. We've got a couple more lunch and learns coming up in the month of October that we will send out invites for. And Nathaniel will be posting this presentation in our YouTube as well channel. So if you've missed any of our lunch and learns, please head to our YouTube channel. You can find them there. And we challenge you guys to review this often and apply it in your day-to-day practices. So thanks again, everyone. Have a fantastic week. Carolyn and Tormod, much appreciated. That was excellent. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.